So the actual topic, I will have a lightning talk here, and it's going to be something like this. And also, I have to say, I am not any kind of an expert on this topic. So what I did, I today read a couple of blog posts, I read some documentation, and made some proof of concept and tried it out, how it works. And the point of this is kind of like learning in public, and also I want to maybe like encourage people to come to these kind of events and learn, share what you learn, these kind of things. Those are useful things. And if there's people who already use these features, I would definitely like to chat with you how you've been using the new feature. But this is something quite new, fresh off the oven. It's I think it was 6 days ago or something. The last part of this was also the scan feature for CloudFormation was released, I think, a week ago or something like that. But it's quite a new thing, and it's definitely interesting. I'm not sure, is it yet how useful, especially the CDK Migrate thing is. There's a big warning messages coming up that be careful when using and things might break, etc., etc. But seems quite interesting. So let's take a quick look about it. So whenever you create some resources, and if you've been using AWS for some time, you probably have a lot of resources in your accounts. Maybe, for example, we started using AWS around 2012, so we do definitely have quite a lot of resources in AWS, and to be honest, not all of them are managed by infra as code, also like CloudFormation and these things. So there is things that people made by hand or by some random scripts, etc. So here is an example. It's a bit small, sorry about that, but basically it's a view from AWS S3 console. So I created an S3 bucket, and you can actually see it's done today, earlier today. So I created an S3 bucket there, and didn't really do anything with it, but the point was that I manually created it from the console, and I wanted to test out these new features of how I can sort of bring that in as part of the infra as code definition with CDK. Of course, with CDK, you can always reference existing resources, so you can use for S3 buckets, you can use from bucket name or something like this, or you can reference the AR and Amazon resource number, all these kind of things. But in the end, those are just references to an existing resources. It's not really a way to manage the resources with CDK that much. There is also CloudFormation resource imports, and to be fair, I haven't used this really much. But with CDK, it seems kind of a tedious job. You first need to define the CDK, basically some CloudFormation stacks with CDK, then deploy those. Then you have to sort of define an empty this S3 bucket, imported bucket, and some at least the removal policy retain is required. And then you synthesize the template in CloudFormation, but you don't deploy it. Then you put that synthesized template in CloudFormation or click this import resources in the stack, and then you select the synthesized template, and then you deploy the template using CloudFormation. And once that's deployed, then you're able to run CDK diff, and it should say that there's no diff because you just imported the resource or something like that. Seems quite complicated, and maybe that's one of the reasons why I sort of haven't touched this. But the new thing is that there's this feature in CloudFormation called IAC generator, so infra as code generator. So the point of this is that it scans your AWS account and finds resources there, and then you can sort of add them in, or it can generate CloudFormation templates for you based on what is found. And first of all, has anybody used this feature at CloudFormation? Yeah, of course. Yesterday. Okay, you were 1 day ahead of me. Applause for me. Yeah, we will have to chat after this session. I have some questions, but how it sort of works.
I have some too. So.
Okay, we can bounce the questions from each other, and maybe I don't know, Amazon Q can maybe provide an answer or something like that. How it works, you just start a new scan, then it takes some time, it scans what kind of resources there are in your account. Probably, this is an account that doesn't really have much, so that didn't take, I think, 5 minutes or something, but it can probably take quite some time if you have a lot of resources, I would assume so. Once it has done the scanning, then you're able to sort of specify like, okay, I want to do something with the scan result. And you can say that, okay, let's start from a new template. I don't know how this works if you update an existing template, so I'm just going to skip it for now. Then you're able to add the resources that the scan found into that CloudFormation template. And it basically, by default, it will list a whole lot of different resources here, but you can also filter them out. So you can filter by, for example, resource type, like I have here, I filtered AWS S3 bucket, and also, for example, tag names or tag values. Here I use the tag value AWS user group fin or UG fin, and use those to filter out results. And it showed me this, and then I click, okay, I want this resource to be added into the generated template. Once that is done, the CloudFormation sort of offers that. In this case, it didn't find any, but it offers like add these related resources. I haven't used this, but I would assume that if you're doing something like VPC related resources, it might bring up something like, I don't know, root tables or something like that that you might have not selected. That it sort of decides that this might be something that has to do with with the resources that you just selected. But in my case, there is none, so I skip ahead. And now in this way view, well, I just review what I'm about to do, but because I'm sort of, I don't never check what I'm doing, I'm just clicking buttons and going forward, so let's do exactly that. So now what it did, it shows me a nice green box there saying that you have successfully created a template, and you can see the template here, or at least part of the template. A couple notes that it might, as you saw here, some warnings. So there might be some properties in those resources that it can't bring as part of the CloudFormation template. In my case, I didn't care about them at all. I just, okay, whatever, and skip this. But this is if you're actually, in my case, I was doing just a POC, trying to figure out how this feature works. But if you're doing something actual work with this, I think this is something to keep in mind, that there might be some things that it's not able to put into the generated CloudFormation. So once it has run successfully, as you can see, there's some YAML, the CloudFormation template there, and then you have a choice to import that to a stack. If you click that, it basically takes you to the CloudFormation view, creating a stack and deploying those resources, basically deploying that stack which has this like resource definition, but the resource is already there, so it doesn't have to create it. But you can also utilize this now with CDK, Amazon Cloud Development Kit. And if you're not familiar with CDK, just a sort of a framework where you can use, for example, TypeScript or Python or Java or Go or .NET to define your infrastructure using like a programming language. But in the background, it of course utilizes CloudFormation. And we can use this new CDK command called Migrate to also sort of piggyback on the scanning result from CloudFormation. So there's this migrate command that takes this argument from scan. So you can say from the most recent scan, or you can specify a new scan. At least it seems that you can yet specify that you could use like some specific previous scan or something. So it's just most recent or new scan. Alternatively, you could say like from path. So if you have a CloudFormation template in your own computer, you could specify from path, or from stack if you want to reference an existing CloudFormation stack in your AWS account. But here I'm most interested about the scanning results, so I'm using the from scan. Then I'm specifying a stack name that will be created where the sort of migrate resources will be put into. And here I can also filter things. So in the scanning phase, I was able to filter that what will be selected into the generated CloudFormation template. And here with CDK, I can also filter what will be put into the generated CDK code. So again, this is kind of unnecessary because I already filtered with that tag, but you get the point that you could do some bit more narrowing there if you want. Then I ran the command, as I said, it gives some experimental warnings, and it's checks the scan and brings those resources in, and then it generates a new CDK app and installs dependencies, and then it complains that something could not be migrated, but I didn't again care at all about it because I'm just figuring things out as I go. And this is what came up. So this is basically, it created me a CDK application with all the default stuff, but this is the most probably interesting bit. So it created this CDK stack called Migrate demo stack as I specified, and then it created this CFN bucket definition there with all the properties that came from the actual S3 resource. So I don't know, it looks pretty okay. It seemed to, again, it was quite simple bucket. It didn't have much configuration in it, but on the first run at least it seemed that it worked. So kind of useful maybe. So then the next step, of course, is I ran the diff against that account. And of course, I actually hadn't deployed this, so there's some parameters and conditions and these kind of things, and this account wasn't even properly bootstrapped, so that's why it's complaining about things, or the bootstrap was old version. But ignore everything else in this screen, but you can see here it's importing the S3 bucket, so it's definitely not creating a new S3 bucket, it's using the existing S3 resource that was found during the scan. So this basically is the sort of workflow that you go to CloudFormation, you create a new scan. Once the scan has finished, then you filter out what resources you're interested in. Once you've selected the resources that you want to put into the generated CloudFormation template, it will output the CloudFormation template, which you can then deploy using CloudFormation, or as I did, I used the new CDK migrate command that utilizes the scan result and then is basically generating CDK code for me. One thing to note that, as I mentioned, it generates these like CFN. If you're familiar with CDK, it has these different kinds of what we call constructs. There's level 1 constructs, which usually have this prefix called CFN. As you can see maybe here, it's the CFN. Doesn't work anyway. It has this CFN prefix, S3 CFN bucket. So it's a one-to-one mapping to a CloudFormation resource. But if you're working with CDK, you often want to utilize the sort of what we call sometimes L2 or like a bit more higher abstraction level constructs. Is, for example, like S3 bucket. You want to have this S3 bucket instead of S3.cfn bucket. So with some resources, you can actually do that you can pass in the level 1 construct, and then it will sort of provide you this higher abstraction level 2 construct. As you can actually see, this is quite a long variable name, and that's exactly that the CDK generated these long variable names and other things. So you probably, if you do this migration that it generates a code for you, you probably would like to, clean it up yourself a little bit. For example, make a bit more sensible variable names and things like that. But this is how it looks when you don't just run the command and don't do anything with it. Just found a few points there that if you're not careful what arguments you pass into the scanning or to the CDK migrate operation, it can take some time and then just suddenly fail. So I think it's important to specify the filters that what kind of a resources you're targeting for. In Jan Kui's case, he had an AWS account with 400,000 resources, so that's probably going to fail if you try to bring in 400,000 resources. So maybe if you have such a large accounts, well, in that case, I wouldn't probably even start with this tool yet. I would just let it mature a bit. But anyway, if you want to do these kind of things, you probably should be a bit mindful of using the filtering. So just being a bit more specific what you want to bring in. Yeah, let's see. There's, I will leave that there for a couple of minutes, but there's just some useful links if you want to follow up on this. As I said, I'm no expert on this topic. I'm just basically describing my sort of learning experience from today, so quite fresh from the memory. So from my point of view, I wouldn't probably use it in a production account to just yet to bring in 400,000 resources or anything like that. But it seems kind of useful. I have some some, you know, as I mentioned, I have some questions, and Petri also has some questions. One of my questions is that it creates a new, the CDK Migrate part creates a new CDK application. So you can of course manually copy paste the stuff into an existing application, but it would be probably useful if you could just do the migration as part of existing CDK app, but I didn't figure it out yet. And there's other things like, for example, the properties that it couldn't import, how do I deal with those? Like if there's things that it can import or can migrate, what do I do then? It's a bit unclear for me. But it seems kind of interesting, and I sort of hope that this tool will mature and maybe in some time I'm able to, you know, get those unmanaged, resources in our AWS accounts that are, manually created or created with some shell scripts or something like that, and bring them in as part of the CloudFormation and CDK infra as code. But yeah, that's it. Just a really brief intro.